Captain Lee Tae-jin stared at the empty space ahead of his cargo ship.
The stars looked cold and distant, just like everything else in his life these days. His ship, the Serenity's Edge, was old and beaten up. The paint was peeling off the hull and the engines made strange noises when they worked too hard. But it was his ship, and it kept him alive. "Captain, we're getting close to Kepler 438b, said Kim Dong-woo from the navigation station. Dong-woo was a thin man with tired eyes. He used to be in the military before the war went bad for humans. Now he just helped Tae-jin fly cargo to mining colonies that barely had enough food to survive. "Good. The sooner we drop off these supplies, the sooner we can get paid," Tae-jin replied. He rubbed his face with both hands. The stubble on his chin felt rough against his palms. He had not slept well in days. Nobody slept well anymore. Not since the Valerian Empire started winning every battle. Down in the engine room, Park Soo-bin was doing what she always did, making miracles happen with broken parts. She was covered in grease and sweat, but her hands moved with the skill of someone who understood machines better than people. Soo-bin could fix anything, which was why Tae-jin paid her more than he could afford. Without her, the Serenity's Edge would have died years ago. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Dong-woo said suddenly. His voice was sharp with concern. "There's a distress beacon coming from the asteroid field. It's weak, but it's definitely there." Tae-jin felt his stomach tighten. Distress beacons usually meant trouble. Pirates sometimes used fake signals to trap cargo ships like his. But real distress calls meant people were dying, and Tae-jin had never been able to ignore those. "Can you tell what kind of ship it is?" he asked. Dong-woo typed commands into his computer. The screen showed a map of the asteroid field with a small blinking dot. "The signal is very old, Captain. The computer says it's been broadcasting for over 100 years. And the ship design, it doesn't match anything in our current database." 100 years? Tae-jin stood up from his captain's chair. "That would put it back to the Golden Age before the Empire started pushing us around." Soo-bin's voice came through the ship's communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I heard what Dong-woo said. If there's really a ship from the Golden Age out there, it might have technology we could use. Or sell. Either way, we should check it out." Tae-jin thought about it. They had enough fuel to make a small detour, and the mining colony could wait a few hours for their supplies. Besides, his curiosity was stronger than his caution. "All right, Dong-woo. Set course for that beacon, but keep our weapons ready just in case." The Serenity's Edge changed direction and flew toward the asteroid field. The rocks floating in space got bigger and more dangerous as they got closer. Some of the asteroids were as large as small moons, casting long shadows that hid whatever might be lurking inside. "There." Dong-woo pointed at his screen. "I can see it now." Tae-jin looked out the front window and gasped. Floating between two massive asteroids was a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. It was huge, at least 3 times the size of his cargo hauler. The hull was dark gray with strange lines and patterns that seemed to shift when he looked at them. Parts of the ship looked damaged, with holes and scorch marks from weapons that must have been incredibly powerful. "By all the stars," Soo-bin whispered. She had come up from the engine room to see for herself. "That's not just any old ship. Look at those weapon ports. Look at the size of those engines. This thing was built for war." The ship had no lights and showed no signs of life. It drifted slowly through space like a sleeping giant. But even dead and dark, it looked dangerous. The weapons on its hull were larger than anything humans used nowadays. The armor was thick and covered with sensors that Tae-jin did not recognize. "The design is definitely human," Dong-woo said, checking his computer again. "But the technology level is way beyond what we have now. This must be from when humans were still fighting the Empire as equals, not just trying to survive." Tae-jin made his decision. "Soo-bin, get your tools. Dong-woo, bring a scanner. We're going aboard that ship." "Captain, is that wise?" Dong-woo asked. "We don't know what happened to the crew. There could be radiation or worse. There could also be answers," Tae-jin replied. "Or technology that could help humanity fight back. Either way, we're not leaving without knowing what's in there." They put on their spacesuits and crossed from the Serenity's Edge to the mysterious ship using a small shuttle. The airlocks were different from modern designs, but Soo-bin managed to get them open with some creative rewiring. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. Their flashlights created small circles of light that moved across walls covered with controls and displays that none of them understood. "The air is stale but breathable," Soo-bin said, checking her scanner. "Life support must have failed decades ago, but the ship is still sealed." They walked through corridors that were wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side. Everything was built large and strong, like the people who made this ship expected it to take serious damage and keep fighting. The walls were covered with blast shields and emergency systems. "Captain, look at this," Dongwu called from ahead. He was standing in front of a large display that showed the ship's layout. "According to this, we're on the HSS Indomitable. I've heard that name before." Tai Jin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. The Indomitable was supposed to be a legend. A prototype warship that disappeared during Operation Starbreak. But that was, he did the math in his head, almost 150 years ago. "Well, it's not a legend anymore," Subin said. She was looking at a different control panel. "And, Captain, I'm reading very faint power signatures from deep inside the ship. Something down there is still alive." As if responding to her words, lights began to flicker on throughout the corridor. The displays came to life with symbols and text that scrolled too fast to read. And somewhere deep in the ship, something that had been sleeping for 150 years began to wake up. The 3 humans looked at each other with a mixture of fear and excitement. They had found something incredible. The question was whether it would save them or kill them. The lights in the corridor grew brighter as Subin worked on the ship's power systems. Her tools sparked against ancient circuits, sending small showers of light through the darkness. Each connection she made brought more of the Indomitable back to life. Control panels hummed with energy they had not felt for 150 years. "This technology is incredible," Subin said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The power systems are more advanced than anything we use today. No wonder this ship was legendary." Taejin and Dongwu explored the bridge while Subin worked. The captain's chair was larger than modern designs, built for someone who expected to spend long hours in battle. The weapon controls covered an entire wall, with buttons and switches for systems they did not recognize. Everything was built to last through the worst kind of fighting. "Captain, you need to see this," Dongwu called from a computer terminal. His voice was shaky with excitement and fear. "I found the ship's logs. The last entry is from Captain Park Jun-ho, dated March 15, 2237. He says they're about to engage a Valerian fleet that outnumbers them 50 to 1. 50 to 1? Taejin repeated. "That's suicide. No ship can fight those odds. According to the log, they thought they could. Captain Park writes about new weapons and defensive systems that would change everything. He believed the Indomitable could win the war by itself." A new voice suddenly filled the bridge, speaking in clear Korean. It was calm and mechanical, but somehow still sounded alive. Human life signs detected. "Beginning revival protocols. Welcome aboard the HSS Indomitable." The 3 humans froze. After 150 years of silence, the ship was talking to them. "I am Aegis," the voice continued. "Advanced electronic guardian and intelligence system. I have been waiting for human contact since the crew entered emergency stasis. Please state your authorization codes." "We don't have authorization codes," Taejin said to the air, feeling foolish. "We're from a cargo ship. We found your distress beacon." "Understood. Emergency protocols now active. Scanning for crew status." There was a pause that lasted several seconds. "Warning. Multiple crew members show no life signs. However, Dr. Yang Mi-young remains in stable cryogenic suspension. Shall I begin revival procedures?" Subin looked up from her work with wide eyes. "Someone still alive on this ship? After all this time?" "Affirmative," Aegis replied. Dr. Yang Mi-young, Chief Science Officer, entered emergency stasis during the final battle. Her pod has maintained life support for 147 years, 4 months, and 16 days. "Wake her up," Taejin said without hesitation. "If anyone can tell us what happened here, it's her." Aegis guided them through the ship's corridors to a medical bay they had not found yet. The room was filled with strange machines and medical equipment that looked far more advanced than anything in current hospitals. In the center of the room stood a large white pod with a window on top. Through the frost-covered glass, they could see the face of a woman who looked like she was sleeping peacefully. Steam hissed from the pod as Aegis began the wake-up process. The frost melted away from the window and they could see the woman's face more clearly. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with short black hair and strong features. Her breathing was slow and steady. "Revival process will take approximately 10 minutes, Aegis announced. "Warning. Dr. Yang may experience confusion and disorientation upon awakening. Please remain calm and speak slowly." While they waited, Dongwu noticed something on his scanner. Captain, I'm picking up new signals from outside the ship. Multiple contacts moving fast. Taejin's blood turned cold.
How many?
Too many to count. And they're big. Much bigger than cargo ships. Dongwu's hands shook as he worked his controls. Captain, I think we found them at the worst possible time. There's a Valerian fleet heading this way. The woman in the pod began to stir. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the bright lights. The pod opened with a soft hiss and she sat up carefully. She looked around the medical bay with confusion, then focused on the three strangers standing beside her. Who are you? She asked in a weak voice. Where is the crew? What happened to the battle? Ma'am, my name is Lee Taejin. This is Park Subin and Kim Dongwoo. We found your ship drifting in the asteroid field. The rest of your crew? He paused, not sure how to break the news gently. The rest of your crew didn't make it. Dr. Yang Mi-young closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, they were filled with sadness but also determination.
How long has it been?
Almost 150 years, Subin said softly. The war didn't go well after your ship disappeared. The Valerians have been pushing humanity back ever since. We're down to just a few colonies now. No, Mi-young whispered. We were supposed to win. The Indomitable was supposed to change everything. She stood up slowly, her legs weak from the long sleep. Aegis, ship status report. Main power at 30% and rising. Weapon systems inactive but functional. Reality distortion shields offline. Quantum phase cannons require calibration. All systems can be brought online, but I require a neural interface with a qualified operator. What's a neural interface? Taejin asked. Mi-young looked at him with haunted eyes. It's how you control the ship's advanced systems. The pilot connects their mind directly to Aegis. They can think the weapons into firing and feel the ship's movement like it's their own body. But it's dangerous. Very dangerous. How dangerous? Subin asked. The first time we tried it, it killed 3 pilots before Captain Park could make it work. Even then, the interface burned out parts of his brain. He was never the same after connecting to the ship. Dongwu looked up from his scanner with panic in his voice. Captain, those contacts are definitely Valerian. I count over 200 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They'll be here in 6 hours. 200 ships, Mi-young repeated quietly. Just like the fleet we fought in our last battle. She walked to a wall display and touched it with her finger. The screen lit up with images of the Indomitable's weapons. We destroyed over half of them before the crew started dying from the neural interface. If we hadn't lost our pilots, we could have won. Could this ship really fight 200 enemies? Taejin asked. The Indomitable isn't just a ship, Mi-young explained. It's a weapon built using technology we barely understood even then. The quantum phase cannons can punch through any shield. The reality distortion field can bend space around us, making enemy weapons miss. But controlling all of that power requires the neural interface. Aegis spoke again. Dr. Yang, I detect Valerian fleet movements consistent with a final assault pattern. Analysis suggests they intend to destroy all remaining human colonies in this sector, including the mining colony we were supposed to deliver supplies to, Dongwu added. There are 3,000 people down there, mostly families. Mi-young looked at the 3 strangers who had awakened her. They were not soldiers or scientists. They were just ordinary people trying to survive in a universe that wanted humanity dead. But they had found the Indomitable when it was needed most. Captain Taejin, she said formally, I'm going to teach you how to use the neural interface. It will probably kill you, but it's the only chance those colonists have. Are you willing to try? Taejin thought about the families on the mining colony. He thought about his own crew, who trusted him to keep them safe. He thought about humanity itself, hanging by a thread while their enemies prepared to cut it. Show me how it works, he said. Outside the ship, space remained dark and peaceful, but that peace would not last much longer. The Valerian Empire's 7th Armada was coming, and they intended to finish what they had started 150 years ago. Dr. Yang Mi-young led them to the bridge of the Indomitable. The captain's chair looked normal from the outside, but when Mi-young opened a panel in the armrest, they could see the neural interface. It looked like a crown made of metal and wires, with small needles that would pierce the user's skull to connect directly to their brain. The interface works by linking your nervous system to Aegis, Mi-young explained as she checked the connections. You'll be able to feel every part of the ship like it's part of your body. The weapons become extensions of your hands. The engines respond to your thoughts. But human brains weren't designed for that much information. Taejin stared at the device. What exactly happened to your captain? Captain Park managed to use it for 20 minutes during our last battle. He destroyed 68 Valerian ships before the interface overloaded his mind. He survived, but he couldn't remember his own name afterward. The other pilots who tried it died within minutes. Subin was working at the engineering station, bringing more systems online. The power core is responding well. Whatever technology this ship uses, it's stable. But I'm reading energy levels that don't make sense. The output is 10 times higher than anything we use today. That's because the Indomitable uses exotic matter for power, Mi Young said. We found it in an asteroid belt near Alpha Centauri. When we learned how to contain it, it changed everything. But controlling that much power requires the neural interface. A communication signal came through the ship's speakers. It was weak and full of static, but they could make out the words. Any human ships in the area, this is New Busan Colony. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. The Valerians are landing troops. They're taking people alive. Please, if anyone can hear this, send help. The signal cut off into silence. Dongwoo checked his navigation computer. New Busan Colony is only 2 systems away from here. If they're attacking there, it means the 7th Armada is moving faster than we thought. Another signal came through, this one stronger. It was a man's voice speaking in rapid Korean. This is Ryu Jaemin from the engineering corps at New Busan. I managed to escape in a maintenance pod. The Valerians aren't just destroying our colonies anymore. They're taking prisoners. I saw them loading people into transport ships. Families, children, everyone. Mi Young's face went pale. Processing centers. They're taking humans to processing centers. What are processing centers? Su Bin asked. Places where the Valerians conduct experiments on other species. They study our biology, our psychology, our weaknesses. Most subjects don't survive more than a few months. Mi Young's hands clenched into fists. We knew this would happen if humanity lost the war. That's why we built the Indomitable. Tae-jin sat down in the captain's chair. The neural interface crown hung above his head like a sword. How long do I have before the interface kills me? We don't know, Mi Young admitted. Captain Park lasted 20 minutes, but he was a trained military officer with years of experience. You're a cargo hauler. It might kill you in 5 minutes, or you might be able to handle it better than he did. There's no way to predict. Captain, you don't have to do this, Dongwoo said. We could run. Hide in the asteroids until the Valerian fleet passes. And then what? Hide forever while they process every human they capture? Tae-jin shook his head. No. If this ship can really fight 200 enemies, then we have to try. Subin looked up from her control panel. I've restored power to the main weapons. The quantum phase cannons are charging, but slowly. It'll take at least an hour to bring them fully online. The Valerian fleet will be here in 4 hours, Dongwoo reported. We have time to prepare. Mi Young began connecting diagnostic equipment to the neural interface. Aegis begin pre-interface calibration. We need to reduce the data flow as much as possible. Understood, Dr. Yang. However, reducing data flow will limit combat effectiveness. The pilot will have access to weapons and movement, but not advanced tactical systems. That's better than dying in the first minute, Mi Young replied. She looked at Tae-jin with concern. Are you sure about this? Once the interface connects, we can't stop it safely. You'll be linked until the battle is over or I die. I understand. Tae-jin closed his eyes and tried to calm his breathing. Will I still be me afterward? Captain Park remembered who he was, but he forgot almost everything else. Technical knowledge, combat training, even how to fly a ship. The interface burns out memories to make room for the ship's data. Another communication signal interrupted them. This time it was weaker, coming from much further away. This is the mining station at Kepler 438b. We're detecting a large fleet approaching our system. We have no defenses. 3,000 civilians request immediate evacuation assistance. That's where we were supposed to deliver supplies, Subin said quietly. Those people are counting on someone to save them. Tae-jin opened his eyes and looked at his crew. Subin was brilliant and loyal, but she was just an engineer. Dongwoo was experienced but haunted by too many defeats. Neither of them deserved to die because of his decision, but the families on that mining station didn't deserve to die either. Subin, can you handle the ship's engineering systems without the neural interface? I think so. The controls are different, but the principles are the same. I can manage power distribution and damage control. Dongwoo, can you work the navigation and communications? Yes, Captain. The layout is strange, but I can figure it out. Good. Mi Young, you'll be my guide through the interface. If I start losing myself, you need to talk me through it. Mi Young nodded reluctantly. Aegis, final calibration check. All systems ready. Warning. Neural interface carries extreme risk of permanent brain damage or death. Do you wish to proceed? Tae-Jin looked at the interface crown one more time. The metal needles gleamed under the bridge lights. He thought about his parents, who had died when the Valerians destroyed his home colony. He thought about the children on the mining station who would never grow up if someone didn't stop the approaching fleet. I wish to proceed. Mi-young lowered the interface onto his head. The needle slid through his skull with sharp pains that made him gasp. Then the connection activated and his world exploded. Information flooded his mind like a tidal wave. He could feel every part of the ship. The power flowing through the exotic matter core, the weapons charging with deadly energy, the hull sensors detecting objects millions of kilometers away. He was no longer just Lee Tae-Jin sitting in a chair. He was the Indomitable itself, but with the ship's power came its memories. He saw flashes of the last battle, enemy ships surrounding them, weapons firing from every direction, crew members screaming as the interface burned out their minds. He felt Captain Park's final thoughts as the man sacrificed his sanity to save his ship. Stay with me, Tae-Jin. Mi-young's voice seemed to come from very far away. Focus on your own identity. Remember who you are. The ship's systems responded to his thoughts. The engines hummed with more power than any human vessel had ever possessed. The quantum phase cannons finished charging, ready to fire beams that could cut through planets. The reality distortion field generators came online, bending space itself around the ship. Contact, Dongwu announced. The Valerian 7th Armada just dropped out of hyperspace. 237 ships led by Admiral Choi Hyun-soo and the dreadnought Inevitable Victory. Through the ship's sensors, Tae-Jin could see them. Hundreds of dark shapes moving through space like predators hunting prey. Each ship was larger than anything humanity built anymore. Their weapons could glass planets. Their shields could stop any attack humans could make, or so they thought. This is Admiral Choi Hyun-soo of the Valerian 7th Armada, came a transmission in heavily accented Korean. Human vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Resistance is futile. Tae-Jin felt the Indomitable's weapons tracking the enemy ships. The quantum phase cannons could fire at the speed of thought. The reality distortion field would make their return fire miss by bending space around his ship. He had the power to hurt them badly, but he also felt his own memories fading as the ship's data overwhelmed his human brain. He struggled to remember Subin's face, Dongwu's voice, his own name. Fight it, Mi-young urged. Remember who you're fighting for. Tae-Jin focused on the image of the mining station. 3,000 innocent people who needed someone to stand between them and the approaching darkness. He was just a cargo hauler, but today he was also humanity's last hope. Admiral Choi, he transmitted back, his voice carrying through space to the Valerian fleet. This is Captain Lee Tae-Jin of the HSS Indomitable. You want a fight? Come and take it. Admiral Choi Hyun-soo stared at the communications display on his flagship's bridge. In over 40 years of military service, no enemy had ever spoken to him with such defiance. The human colonies usually begged for mercy or tried to negotiate surrender terms. They never challenged the 7th Armada to a fight. Admiral, the human ship is moving to intercept us, reported his tactical officer. It's alone. No escort vessels, no defensive formations. One ship against 237? Choi laughed, but there was something wrong with the situation. The human vessel was larger than any ship in their current fleet databases. Its design was old, but somehow looked more dangerous than modern human vessels. Run a full scan. I want to know what we're dealing with. Back on the Indomitable, Tae-Jin felt the enemy sensors washing over his ship like invisible fingers. Through the neural interface, he could sense each probe and scan as if they were touching his own skin. The sensation was strange and overwhelming, but he was beginning to understand how to process the information. They're trying to analyze our capabilities, he said aloud, though his own voice sounded distant to his ears. They don't recognize our technology. That's because this ship is from before their databases, Mi-young explained. The Valerians have been fighting modern humans for so long they've forgotten what we were capable of during the Golden Age. Subin was working frantically at the engineering station. All weapons are fully charged. Power core is stable at 95%. Reality distortion field generators are online and ready. Dongwu, how many civilian ships are fleeing from the mining station? I count 12 transport vessels, but they're slow and defenseless. The Valerian fleet will intercept them in 30 minutes if we don't stop them. Through the ship's sensors, Tae-jin could see the evacuation ships struggling to escape. They were overloaded with families and children, moving as fast as their old engines could manage. Some of them were mining haulers like his own ship had been, not built for speed or fighting. The Valerians are launching fighters, Mi-young observed, watching the tactical display. 40 squadrons. They're going after the civilian ships first. Hundreds of small enemy fighters poured out of the larger ships like angry insects. They moved in tight formations, their weapons already charging for attack runs on the helpless transports. It was a classic Valerian tactic. Kill the civilians first to break the enemy's will to fight. But Tae-jin was no longer just a cargo hauler watching people die. He was the Indomitable, and he had weapons that could reach across impossible distances. Engaging enemy fighters, he announced. The quantum phase cannons responded to his thoughts, swiveling to track targets that were still millions of kilometers away. The weapons fired beams of exotic energy that existed in multiple dimensions at once, allowing them to strike targets that conventional weapons could never hit. The first fighter squadron simply vanished. One moment they were flying in perfect formation toward the civilian ships. The next moment, empty space remained where 60 Valerian fighters had been. No explosions, no debris. They were just gone, deleted from existence by weapons that bypassed normal space entirely. Impossible, Admiral Choi whispered on his flagship. No human weapon has that range or power, but Tae-jin was just getting started. The neural interface let him fire all of the ship's weapons simultaneously, while tracking hundreds of targets. Fighter squadrons disappeared one after another, as the quantum phase cannons swept through their formations. The Valerians had never seen anything like it. All fighters destroyed, Dong-woo reported with amazement. The civilian transports are safe. Now for the main fleet, Tae-jin said. Through the interface, he could feel the larger enemy ships beginning to understand what they faced. Their captains were ordering emergency evasive maneuvers and charging their heaviest weapons. The Valerian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma lances that could melt mountains, fusion torpedoes that burned like small suns, and particle beams that could cut through space itself all converged on the Indomitable's position. But Tae-jin activated the reality distortion field, and space itself bent around his ship. The enemy weapons curved away harmlessly, their targeting systems confused by the twisted geometry around the Indomitable. Some shots missed by thousands of kilometers, others struck empty space where the ship appeared to be but wasn't. Their weapons can't touch us, Su-bin said in wonder. The distortion field is working perfectly, but it's using enormous amounts of power, Mi-young warned. We can't maintain it indefinitely. Tae-jin didn't need it to last forever. Through the neural interface, he could sense the optimal firing solutions for every enemy ship. The quantum phase cannons could punch through their shields as if they were made of paper. He just needed to get close enough to use the ship's full power. The Indomitable accelerated toward the Valerian fleet at speeds that should have been impossible. The exotic matter drive could bend space to achieve faster than light travel even in normal space, making the ship appear to teleport from one position to another. By the void, Admiral Choi exclaimed as his tactical officer reported the human ship's movement. It just covered 50,000 kilometers in 3 seconds. Our sensors can barely track it. Admiral, the ship is targeting our heavy cruisers, the tactical officer announced. It's lining up for attack runs on multiple vessels simultaneously. The Indomitable's main guns fired in a carefully coordinated pattern. Each quantum phase beam struck a different Valerian cruiser, the exotic energy punching through their shields and armor as if they were tissue paper. The beams continued through the ships and out the other side, leaving perfectly round holes that glowed with residual energy. Atmosphere and debris streamed from the wounded vessels as their crews struggled to contain catastrophic damage. Some ships exploded immediately when the beams struck their reactor cores. Others died slowly as life support failed and fire spread through their hulls. 12 heavy cruisers destroyed, Dong-woo reported. The enemy fleet is breaking formation. But the neural interface was taking its toll on Tae-jin's mind. He could feel his human memories fading as the ship's tactical data overwhelmed his brain. He struggled to remember why he was fighting, who he was protecting, even his own name. Stay focused, Mi-young urged. Remember the families on those transport ships. Remember who you are. Tae-jin forced himself to think about Su-bin working in the engine room, Dong-woo at his navigation station, the children on the evacuation ships. His human identity was like a small flame in a hurricane of alien information, but he refused to let it go out. The Valerian dreadnoughts were moving to intercept him now. These were the largest ships in their fleet, with weapons that could destroy cities and armor that could withstand almost anything. Admiral Choi himself commanded the lead dreadnought, a massive vessel called the Inevitable Victory. "Human ship, this is your final warning," came the Admiral's transmission. "Surrender now and your crew will be granted quick deaths. Continue fighting and we will capture you for processing." "Admiral," Tae-jin replied, his voice carrying across space with deadly calm, "you're about to learn why humanity once ruled the stars." The three dreadnoughts opened fire together, their combined firepower enough to crack a moon, but the Indomitable danced between their shots like a fighter craft, the reality distortion field making it impossible for their targeting computers to lock on. Then Tae-jin fired back. The quantum phase cannons had been charging during the entire battle, drawing power from the exotic matter core. When they fired at full power, the beams were visible as tears in space itself, wounds in reality that bled exotic energy. The first beam struck the Inevitable Victory amidships. It passed through the ship's shields without slowing down, punched through 30 meters of armor plating, and continued through the vessel's core systems. The dreadnought's reactor containment failed, and the ship died in a flash of fusion fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Admiral Choi Hyun-soo's last thought was a moment of understanding. He finally realized what his empire had been fighting all these years. Not the weak, desperate humans of the current era, but the descendants of a species that had once built weapons capable of destroying gods. The second and third dreadnoughts tried to retreat, but the Indomitable was faster. 2 more reality-tearing beams reached out across space, and 2 more impossible explosions lit up the darkness. The pride of the Valerian 7th Armada burned like dying stars. "Status report," Tae-jin managed to say, though his voice was becoming weaker as the neural interface consumed more of his mind. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," Dong-woo announced. 37 ships destroyed, including all 3 dreadnoughts. "The survivors are jumping to hyperspace. Civilian transports are all clear," Subin added. "They're safely out of the system." Tae-jin tried to smile, but he wasn't sure if his face was responding to his commands anymore. The neural interface was burning through his brain like acid, destroying his memories to make room for the ship's data. He could feel himself disappearing piece by piece, but he had won. Humanity's forgotten prototype had awakened from its long sleep and reminded the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The Valerian Empire would remember this day, and they would fear it. The neural interface crown lifted away from Tae-jin's head with a soft hiss of released pressure. Small drops of blood marked where the needles had penetrated his skull. His eyes were open, but they stared at nothing, unfocused and empty. For a terrifying moment, Subin thought they had lost him completely. "Captain," she called softly. "Tae-jin, can you hear me?" He blinked slowly like someone waking from a deep sleep. When he turned his head toward her voice, she could see that something fundamental had changed. His eyes held knowledge that had not been there before. Tactical information, weapons data, and combat algorithms from the ship's memory banks. But they also seemed to have lost something essentially human. He started to speak, then stopped, his forehead wrinkled with concentration. "I remember flying cargo ships, but I also remember commanding star destroyers in battles that happened before I was born. Which memories are real?" Mi-young checked the medical scanners attached to his chair. "The neural interface has integrated ship data into your long-term memory. You'll have both sets of memories for the rest of your life. In time, you should be able to tell the difference between what you experienced and what the ship experienced." "Should be able to?" Dong-woo asked with concern. "What happened to Captain Park?" "Captain Park never fully recovered. The ship's memories were too strong and they overwhelmed his personal identity. He spent his last years thinking he was someone else entirely." Mi-young looked at Tae-jin with worry. "But every person responds differently to the interface. There's no way to predict the long-term effects." Tae-jin stood up slowly from the captain's chair. His legs were shaky, but he managed to stay upright. "I know my name. I know my crew. I remember why we're here." He paused, touching his forehead where the needles had been. "But I also know how to fight a war that ended 150 years ago." The ship's communication system activated, bringing them messages from across human space. Word of the victory was already spreading through the colonies faster than light itself. The evacuation ships from the mining station had broadcast the entire battle, sending recordings to every human outpost they could reach. "This is New Geneva Colony," came one transmission. "We confirm receipt of your battle recordings. Is it true? Did one ship really destroy the entire 7th Armada?" "This is the research station at Wolf 359, came another. "We're detecting massive Valerian fleet movements throughout the sector. They're pulling back from all forward positions." "What did you do out there?" Subin monitored the engineering systems while the messages poured in. "The exotic matter core is stable, but it's running much cooler than during the battle. I think using that much power at once stressed the containment system. Can you fix it?" Mi-young asked. "I think so. The technology is incredibly advanced, but the principles are similar to what I know. Give me a few days and I should be able to optimize the power flow." Subin wiped grease from her hands with a rag. "The real question is what we do next." That question was answered by a new transmission, this one coming on official military channels. "HSS Indomitable, this is Admiral Lee Kyung-min of the Colonial Defense Force. By order of the Human Colonial Council, you are directed to proceed immediately to the naval base at Proxima Centauri for debriefing and strategic planning." "An admiral?" Dongwu said with surprise. "I thought all the high-ranking officers were dead." "Some of us survived," the transmission continued. "We've been hiding in the outer colonies, waiting for a chance to strike back. Your victory today has given us that chance. But the Valerians won't ignore this humiliation. They'll be sending everything they have to hunt you down." Mi-young pulled up star charts on the navigation computer. "He's right. The Empire has dozens of fleets larger than the 7th Armada. When they learn what happened here, they'll mobilize forces we can't imagine. But they've also learned that their current ships can't fight us," Tae-jin said. His voice was stronger now, though it still carried an odd quality that had not been there before. "They'll have to develop new weapons, new tactics. That takes time." "How much time?" Subin asked. "Based on Valerian military doctrine from the last war, approximately 6 months to design and build new weapon systems. Another 3 months to deploy them to frontline units." Tae-jin paused, realizing that the knowledge had come from the ship's memory banks, not his own experience. Or at least that's how long it took them during the Golden Age. Another transmission interrupted their discussion. This one was not from human sources. It was broadcast on a Valerian frequency, spoken in their hissing reptilian language but automatically translated by the ship's systems. "Attention all Imperial forces," the message began. "This is High Command. Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect. All fleets are to withdraw to defensive positions immediately. The humans have deployed a new weapon of unknown capabilities. Do not engage human vessels unless you significantly outnumber them. They're afraid," Dongwu said with satisfaction. "For the first time in decades, the Valerians are afraid of us." But Mi-young was studying readouts from the ship's long-range sensors. "They should be afraid, but fear makes them dangerous in different ways. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of Valerian space. They're powering up weapons that have been dormant for centuries." "What kind of weapons?" Tae-jin asked. "The kind they used to conquer entire star systems during their expansion wars. Planet crackers, reality bombs, entropy cannons. Weapons so destructive that they agreed never to use them again." Mi-young's face was pale with worry. If they're activating those systems, it means they consider humanity an existential threat. The communication system activated again with a message from the human admiral. "Indomitable, we've just received intelligence reports about increased Valerian military activity. They're mobilizing their entire empire for war, not just against our remaining colonies but against humanity as a species. They intend to wipe us out completely." "How many people are we talking about?" Subin asked quietly. "Approximately 50 million humans scattered across 200 colonies and space stations," the admiral replied. "Most of them are civilians with no military training or defensive capabilities." Tae-jin felt the weight of that number settle on his shoulders. 50 million people who would die if the Valerians carried out their plan. The neural interface had given him the knowledge to fight, but it had also shown him exactly how outmatched humanity was in terms of raw numbers and resources. "There are other ships," he said suddenly. "Other prototypes like the Indomitable." Mi-young looked at him with surprise. "How do you know that?" Captain Park's memories. He knew about the other projects, the other experimental vessels. They're hidden throughout human space, waiting for someone to wake them up. Tae-jin walked to the navigation computer and began entering coordinates. "The HSS Retribution in the Vega system. The HSS Defiance near Alpha Centauri. The HSS Victory hidden in the asteroid belt around Sol. Sol? Dongwu repeated. That's Earth's solar system. But Earth fell to the Valerians 20 years ago. The surface fell. But there are still humans in the underground cities and orbital stations. If we could reach them, wake up the Victory. Taejin trailed off as the full scope of the task ahead became clear. We'd need crews for each ship. People willing to use the neural interface despite the risks. I'll do it, Subin said without hesitation. If it means saving those 50 million people, I'll take the risk. And me, Dongwu added. I've been running from the Valerians for 10 years. It's time to fight back. Mi Young smiled for the first time since awakening from stasis. The three of you are either very brave or completely insane. But you've already done the impossible once today. Maybe you can do it again. The Indomitable's engines hummed to life, powered by exotic matter and human determination. They had won one battle, but the war for humanity's survival was just beginning. The Valerian Empire would bring everything they had to bear against the species that had dared to awaken its sleeping giants. But they were no longer the same humans who had been pushed to the brink of extinction. They had remembered what they were capable of when pushed too far. They had ships that could bend reality and weapons that could wound space itself. Most importantly, they had something the Empire had never truly understood: the human refusal to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. As the Indomitable jumped to hyperspace, heading for coordinates that would lead them to another sleeping giant, Taejin felt the ship's power flowing through his altered mind. He was no longer just a cargo hauler from the outer colonies. He was the captain of humanity's most advanced warship, carrying the hopes of 50 million people who needed someone to stand between them and extinction. The neural interface had taken parts of his humanity, but it had given him something in return: the power to ensure that humanity itself survived. Whether that trade was worth it remained to be seen. But for now it was enough that the war was not over. As long as one human ship remained to fight, as long as one person refused to surrender, the species would endure. The Indomitable disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its crew toward battles that would determine the fate of two civilizations. Behind them, the wreckage of the Valerian 7th Armada drifted through space like a warning to any who would threaten humanity's children.